Hi, everyone. All right. Let me make sure my lighting is good. Can you all do me a favor? And I think in the Q&A box, maybe, can you let me know if you can hear me okay before I get started? All right, thanks. All right, it's 5, or it's time. It's 5 o'clock my time. But everybody is tuning in from all over, from all kinds of different places. So I am going to move this over so I can't see it. All right. Welcome. So thank you for showing up for this free masterclass called Heal. For anybody that is new here, may not know me, my name is Macie. I am an emotional intelligence and life coach, or emotional intelligence life coach. And basically, I have a podcast that is called, gosh, I can't even think of it. I just went blank. How sad is that? This is Not Your Practice Life, formerly called Becoming Your Highest Self. And I help people become more self-aware and emotionally intelligent so that they can create the life that feels really, really good to them. Because what you will find is that where your limits come from a lot of times is based on your upbringing and beliefs that you've picked up over time. Just a lot of stories that your mind holds on to about why you can't be where you want to be or have relationships you want to have. And my goal for anybody that comes into my world, whether they're someone who listens to the podcast or they end up working with me, is that their life feels really, really good to them, no matter what that looks like. So if there was ever a masterclass to attend, I feel like this is probably the biggest one, because this is, in my opinion, the most important work we will ever do in our life. It impacts everything. And so just the fact that you all are showing up for yourselves today is huge. So I just want to thank you again for being here and let you know that the whole overall goal is to learn what our unhealed patterns look like, how to respond to our triggers in a healthy way, and how to know if we've actually really healed from something, because I get that question a lot. How do I know when I've actually healed from something that has hurt me or someone who has hurt me? You'll also notice I use my hands a lot. I apologize. It's like, what do I do with my hands while I'm talking? So I'll use those a lot. But if you have any questions, what I want to say is wait until the end, because I'm not going to see anything. I can see names, but I can't see any faces. So hopefully you're cozy and just settling in. I know it's Thanksgiving week, so just thank you again for being here. But if you could just save your questions for me at the very end, and then I will go through everything that you want to know. All right. So I think the first thing to really ask ourselves is, what are we even healing from? There are going to be some of you here that had amazing upbringings, like you're really close with your caregivers, whether that's your parents or your grandparents or whoever raised you. There's also going to be people here that had kind of a shaky childhood. And I think no matter what your childhood may be, a lot of us logistically or like logically know that our parents did the best that they could with what they had. But a lot of times what we're healing from are the things that they didn't heal from. Okay. So whatever cycles our caregivers were in, a lot of times that's exactly what we're healing from. And without awareness, we just keep repeating cycles, because whatever they taught us, whatever patterns we saw in our caregivers, those are the patterns that become subconscious to us, and then we repeat them unless there was a situation where it scarred us and we're like, I don't want to be like that. Or we just like, we're, super aware and we know that we want things to be different. So when it comes to what we're actually healing from, most times it's going to be from whatever you experienced circumstantially in your childhood and from the people that you grew up around, whoever that may be. The big key things that are so important around like what we're actually healing from is, building up our self-awareness, because if we're not aware of why we're even doing what we're doing, or why we're thinking what we're thinking, or why we're feeling what we're feeling, You can't fix it. You can't fix something that you don't even know or understand to be a problem. And that's why a lot of times for our parents, they continued on whatever cycles they were brought into, again, unless it was so painful for them that they actively decided to change it. And sometimes, even though certain cycles were painful for our parents or have been painful for us, doesn't mean that we actively know how to change it. A lot of times it will feel so ingrained in us, we just think that it's stuck that way, and this is how it's got to be, or this is how it's been, and we don't really understand that we have full potential to change whatever isn't working in our life. So self-awareness is going to be the most important thing, and I think the most important skill that you'll develop, and the biggest things that I help with my clients with, because like, if you don't even know what you're thinking or what you're feeling or what you're doing or why, how in the world and why would you change it? The next thing is emotional regulation. So this is huge because formerly, before I became a full-time certified emotional intelligence life coach, I was a pediatric occupational therapist, and I worked with birth to age 3 kids and their families. And so what that looked like, it was called early intervention. You probably have it in your state. I would go into homes of children that had delays of intellectual delays, developmental delays, and I would work directly with whoever their caregiver was. And I will tell you that one of the most important skills I would work on with these babies, right, from birth to 3, was their emotional regulation. We called it social emotional skills. And the important thing about this is that it is something that is taught, right? Like, kids don't automatically know how to regulate themselves emotionally. They are depending on their caregiver to show them those skills and to show them exactly how to have those skills. So my point there is that if you as an adult, right, or even thinking of your parents, however it's easiest for you to think of this right now, if you didn't have the skills or don't have the skills, if your parents didn't have the emotional regulation skills, how can you teach it to your little ones, right? If you fly off the handle every time you're upset, if you scream every time you get triggered by something, if your immediate reaction is to like grab a child up, right, and spank them or whatever you do, it's coming from what is happening inside of you. And if you don't know what to do with it, it's going to be very hard to teach that to your little ones. So this is what I mean, where a lot of times cycles get passed down. Like, even if you were like in a great household, but you can remember certain things that your mom or dad did or your grandparents did, and you're like, yeah, that was a little scary. Like, they chased me with a fly swatter, right? Or they took a switch from a tree and came after me, or whatever. A lot of times, like, those things are carried down based on however they regulated their emotions. So they respond, and then you learn that, and based on how you felt, you either continue and carry it on because you're like, well, this is what I know, or you're like, I didn't like that. I didn't like how that felt. And so you have enough self-awareness to be like, I'm gonna try something different. Okay. So that emotional regulation is a huge piece, and it's the next biggest thing I work on with even my clients, is how are you regulating what's happening in your body? Because based on how we feel is how we act or what we do. So if we're not aware of what we're feeling, we're going to respond in ways that we don't always feel proud of. And so the third thing is building up our emotional intelligence skills, which is really a fancy way of saying our emotional awareness and maturity. Emotional intelligence is one of the most important skills you could ever develop. It's more important, I think, than IQ. Actually, there's been a lot of studies showing that it's more important than someone's smarts or how intelligent they are intellectually. Because if you cannot respond well with your emotions, you're going to find yourself in a lot of sticky situations, and creating a life that probably doesn't feel as great as it has the potential to feel. All right. So I want to kind of bring awareness to your patterns, and I really want you to kind of think about the answers to some of these questions as I read through them, because we don't often realize just how sneaky patterns arise in our body and how and why they stay there. So what I really want to draw attention to is asking you a question like, what did you learn in childhood? Your first 7 years of life are the most crucial in your development. In fact, your brain is a little sponge those first 7 years of life. So whatever the dynamic looked like in your life at that time is going to be very important, whether that meant that life was really good or, traumatic things happen. Those are going to be your formative years where everything in your way of being a lot of times is subconscious. So the way that you carry yourself as an adult is really based on what you saw, heard, experienced those first 7 years of life. So I just want you thinking about that. What kind of things did you learn? And to give examples of like severe or not severe, let's just say like right now you're in a place where maybe you struggle with your weight or you don't really love your body image. What things did you learn as a child about that? Like, do you have experiences where you were bullied? Do you remember your parents saying things like, don't be wasteful with your meals, you need to eat everything? Do you remember having maybe a caregiver who was very into body image and how they looked, and maybe even obsessive, like, we're going to eat healthy all the time? Like, it seems so silly, but the things that you are surrounded by in your day-to-day life become these patterns where if you're not aware of them, you don't always know why you're behaving the way that you're behaving. So just want to get your brain going on what kind of things did you learn, no matter what it is, whether it's really good things. Like I can remember some good things that I remember from my grandparents. My grandparents raised me. I can remember my papa saying, if you ever find something that doesn't belong to you, you should take it to the worker, right? And when you're little, you don't really question why until you get a little bit older. Those first 7 years of life, it just kind of becomes law. And so I'm still like that to this day. If I find something that doesn't belong to me, but I think somebody might be missing it, like a wallet or a phone, or I remember when I was 13, it was somebody had lost their little iPod. And back then those were amazing because we didn't have the phones that we had now. And I remember finding it at the movie theater with my papa and being like, man, I really want to keep this. And he was like, what's the right thing to do? And I was like, return it. And I said, but what if I give it to the desk worker and she takes it because it's such a great thing? And he was like, it's not about that. It's about your integrity that you did the right thing, right? And so there are going to be lessons in your life that stick with you and things you learn where you decide, I really like that. I want to keep that. And that's still how I operate to this day. But there are also going to be things that you learn where you're like, yeah, I don't really know that I like that. For instance, like maybe if you grew up constantly getting spanked and it didn't feel good and you have not the best memories about it, you might be different with your kids where you try more gentle parenting, or you don't, you try not to react the same way that maybe your parents did. So just thinking about what kind of things did you learn? What were you told and taught? How did you receive love or keep the peace? So when I ask this question, this is because this is something that comes up all the time with my clients. It came up all the time when I was getting coached way in the beginning with my coach. There are ways in which we feel like we receive love. So let's say you have a parent who's quick to anger. They're not good at regulating their emotions, okay? And you learned as a kid that you had to tiptoe or walk on thin ice or behave a certain way or get certain grades to make sure that nothing in the house, like the boat wasn't rocked with your father or your mother or your caregiver, whoever it may be. And so you kind of learned, like, when I behave this way, I'm praised and I get love. When I behave this way, we get yelled at or screamed at, or, like mom gets really mad because dad's really mad. You know what I mean? Like there are things in which we learn kind of from our own experiences and our own caregivers. We learn how to be a receiver of love, and how to keep the peace. And so this is a lot of times where those people-pleasing patterns can develop in our childhood. So I just want you to kind of think about that. What patterns were fostered around this time? What circumstances stuck with you? So memories that you have specifically, traumas that maybe you endured. And trauma is so subjective to every single person. A trauma is whatever your body and brain feels like, was very life altering for you. So, what one person considers traumatic, if the exact same thing happened to another person, they might not consider it traumatic. And it's not for us to decide. It's really about what felt like a life-altering moment that changed me forever. And a lot of times it's forms of abuse, right? Sexual abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, domestic abuse, whether you saw it or you were someone on the receiving end of it, those things can stick with us because it's how, like, in that moment, our body was just like, this is not okay, or this, my fight or flight was activated. Thinking about limiting beliefs that you've developed over time. And then lastly, what did you need more or less of? Or what really did you need? Like, is there anything lingering from maybe your upbringing where you're like, I needed more of this? And so to give you an example here, it might be like, I needed to feel safe, or I needed more safety. I needed approval to feel loved. I needed validation. That's probably the biggest one that comes up across the board for my clients. It's feeling the need to be validated. And what's so interesting is that, it could be one of two things. It could be like you grew up in the family that validated everything you did, and they were so proud of everything you did, and they celebrated everything you did. So when you get out in the world and people no longer do that the way that your family did, you feel like, I need validation because I grew up in it so much. It was always given to me. And now without it, I don't feel complete, right? But it could also be the opposite, where you grew up in a family where you were never praised and you were never validated and you never really knew if you were doing a good job or not. And in that way, you might feel like when you get out in the world, you need that validation from other people. So this is more so just noticing what patterns are within yourself. Did you need more patience? Did you need love? Did you need encouragement? Did you need honesty? Did you grow up watching a lot of, lies, or just, if you witnessed any kind of infidelity, or your parents divorced or anything, like, you might have a strong need for people being honest and transparent. So just the act of becoming aware of maybe what things are being held and stored in your body can be huge for your healing process. Okay. And if you end up ever coaching, whether it's with me or someone else, these are things that we're going to explore very deeply, because it doesn't just happen like this. Like, if you're watching right now, you're going to find that it's not just this easy thing where you're like, oh, I recognized it, I'm healed. It takes some unpacking about what your brain has even made that stuff mean and how it's showing up right now in your life. So let's talk about how we carry all of this stuff moving forward. And I'm sorry for the glares. But here's the important thing. And I'm a very visual person. I spared you from my drawings. Trust me, my clients know that they're not always the best. They're stick people. So I spared you from that, but this is how I visualize the pieces of us that are unhealed. So what I put here is what we feel that we are missing or didn't get, maybe as kids, teenagers, young adults, or whatever we haven't healed from, become our energetic holes. Okay, so if you imagine a silhouette, this is a silhouette of someone kind of almost in the fetal position, right? Whenever there's something that you feel you're missing, or something that's been traumatic, something that you haven't actually taken the time to really deeply heal, or maybe because you don't even know how, it becomes like this energetic hole within us. And I'm going to show you exactly how this plays out in relationships, because as you probably know, whatever we haven't healed comes to the surface through other people, through people at work, coworkers, siblings, parents, like complicated relationships, our partners when you start dating or when you get married. Like, anything that is unhealed and unresolved will come up as you're navigating life. And I want you to be able to see and recognize, again, have the awareness of your responsibility in it. And something I forgot to mention back in the beginning is that the things that have happened to you in your life, right, are not your fault. A lot of those things, like everything that happens in our childhood, we were little, so it wasn't our fault, right? But here, like, when you become an adult, there comes a point in time where you have to take responsibility for where you're at, or how you're feeling, or what you're thinking, and change it. And that's probably the hardest thing to do. And that's why you will encounter a lot of people in life that are not doing this more painful healing work, and not looking into themselves, and not investing into their mental and emotional health, be it therapy or coaching or whatever it may be. There's going to be a lot more people who aren't doing that, because they're going to feel stuck and like it's everybody else's fault who has caused them to be this way, and forget that even if their past was not their fault and they couldn't control it and they were placed, in some really awful situations, dealt a really bad hand of cards, that as an adult, it is our responsibility to heal our stuff, because what we don't heal, we continue on in a cycle and we keep passing it down. And so if you don't want to be the person doing that, you have to take charge of your life and actually commit to doing this work. Okay. And it's hard. So I get why a lot of people don't want to, but it will be the most life-changing work you ever do. So our holes, okay, are the triggers that end up impacting our relationship. Our awareness of those holes contribute to the emotional regulation that we have and the maturation. So how mature we are emotionally. And the reason that these triggers go unnoticed is for this reason. So I'm going to make this a little bit interactive, so that way you hopefully will get exactly what I'm saying. But what's interesting energetically about the holes that are within us is that anything that we don't heal, our body energetically seeks out in other people. Okay. And what we're seeking out in other people, a lot of times, those people that are also navigating life, right? So I like using this example with like dating, but it can also be with coworkers and friendships. It can be really with anything. But what ends up happening, like, let's say you're someone, one of the holes is that you just feel like you need validation. You don't trust yourself. You don't trust your decisions. You just feel like, I just want to be validated. I want someone to tell me I'm great. I want someone to tell me I'm loved. I want someone to tell me I'm doing a good job. I want someone to tell me I'm being an awesome mom. Okay, when you don't fulfill that for yourself, you're walking around, think of it like a beam of light that comes straight through you. It's a hole, right? There will be people navigating the world that will know how to fill that for you, fill that void, right? So when we haven't healed, a lot of times we will attract people into our life who temporarily let us borrow that piece we feel we are missing. Okay, so I've got my glue stick here. So I want you to think of this in terms of dating, because I think that that's when it really, truly hits home. If you were someone that needed validation, if you don't feel happy, you're like, I can't, I'm in a funk. I feel constantly depressed. I feel like I need a relationship. I'm lonely. I want to feel happy. Or, I don't feel loved. I didn't get the love I needed as a kid. I really crave that love. I want to experience that love. There will be people that, again, are navigating the world, and you all are going to connect based on what you are missing. Okay. So for instance, let's say Mr. Right, or at least it feels like Mr. Right, comes in and he validates you. Okay. So he validates, you're an amazing mom, you're an amazing wife, or not wife, because you'd be dating, but you're an amazing person. Temporarily, that will fill you up. Okay. My glue stick is not gluing. How convenient. Okay. Right? So they'll kind of fill that in. And same thing with happiness. Like, you didn't feel happy before them, but now that they're in your life, you feel so happy. They have come in, swooped in, they, tell you everything you want to hear. They make you feel really, really good. And it's just amazing. And so you now feel happy. You're not alone. It's like, oh, great. You are freaking phenomenal. You're everything I needed in my life. Okay. And then same thing with love, right? I didn't feel loved as a kid, or I didn't feel like I got the love that I wanted or the love that I needed. And this person comes in your life and they're like, oh, I'll love you. Okay. And so what they start doing is filling up your holes. So then guess what? A lot of times you'll not even know that there's work that you could be doing until you're triggered. We're going to get to that, but you will feel complete, but not because you've healed. You feel complete based on the loan of the other person. And I will tell you how to know that this is the case is when that person leaves, specifically talking about, let's say, a breakup. You're madly in love with this person, okay? And they're everything you ever thought you wanted, and you feel validated, and you feel happy, and you feel loved. And then one day they tell you, this is not going to work. I'm not really feeling it. I'm really sorry. Okay. And they break up with you and they leave. Guess what they take with them? Validation. Okay. You're going to take it back because it was on a loan. The happiness that you felt was based on what they brought. It was on a loan. And the love that you felt with them was on a loan. Okay. Now, Mr. Prince Charming, that was amazing, is gone. And he took the things that he let you borrow with him. And so what are you left with? The things you still have not healed. This is why a lot of times those breakups are so painful. Friendships that we are, people we're no longer friends with is painful. Losing something or someone is super painful. One, yes, because of our humanness, but two, because a lot of times we didn't realize that we were relying on other people to fill us because we weren't healing our own stuff. So like a way to combat this is when you have filled your own holes, right? When you learn self-love, when you learn self-happiness, when you learn how to validate yourself, you're not seeking it in another person. Therefore, you're going to attract the people who are also whole themselves. Okay. So they're going to feel whole. You're going to feel whole and you're going to attract those healthy partnerships. This is what keeps us in a lot of times this unhealthy kind of cycle or relationships where we're triggering one another, right? Because our partner probably has holes that we've plugged for them. We have holes that they have plugged for us. And then whenever we're triggered, if we haven't actually healed it, we're going to become emotionally activated. If you don't have the emotional regulation skills, that's where everything starts to fall apart and life starts to feel very icky. And it will feel very blah. And that's usually whenever people call me, right? Or people get on a podcast or people start reading a self-help book because they're like, help me. I don't know what's happening. And I'm like, I know exactly what's happening. I know exactly. Okay. So let's talk about how this will look and play out. We're going to ignore this for a moment. I'm going to start down here. So you'll notice that you get triggered by certain people or circumstances. So maybe the holidays are coming up, you're going to be around people. Ideally, we love to believe that we love everybody in our family. We love all our friends. We love all our coworkers. But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes there's people in a friend group we're not very fond of that have hurt us, or we've hurt them, or there's just tension because we don't see eye to eye. Sometimes that's the case with family. Sometimes that's the case with coworkers, if it's, a holiday event party, whatever. And so you'll feel triggered by certain people and certain things. And it's really important just to notice what that trigger is and why it's even there to begin with. Also, you might feel reliant on other people. Like you will feel like, they need to be this certain way and I'm good and I'm happy, because if they're not this certain way, then I kind of feel out of body. I don't really feel like myself. It may look like having manuals for other people. So manuals are basically an invisible rule book, I like to say, that lives in our head, where we have a certain idea of how people should think, speak, act, feel, things that they should do. And basically, if they're following our ideal manual that lives up in our brain, like do the dishes this way, or clean this way, or strap the kids into their car seat this way, or feed them this way, or, take the trash out this way, like whatever it is. Okay, we have manuals. I have a podcast episode on that early on in my podcast. And we do this, but like with our kids, it's like, I need you to behave this certain way because I am on edge. And so if you can't behave this certain way, I'm going to freak out, right? That's a perfect example. Same with your parents. I need you to be the mom who will, or I need you to be the dad that will insert whatever you think that they should do. Or it just feels like my life is falling apart. Like I don't have the family of my dreams, right? And so you have a manual of how you believe your parents should be. You have a manual of what you think your kids should or shouldn't be. You have a manual for how your significant other should or shouldn't be. Same thing with coworkers, same things with friends. This is very normal for us as humans. We all have manuals. We have manuals on time. We have manuals on how to do things. We have manuals of how, again, people should behave. And so when people aren't doing these things, we will have an emotional reaction. The key here is, what emotional reaction are you having? And are you managing it? Or are you trying to get someone to be something that they're not so that you feel better? Without the awareness, you'll make others responsible for being able to emotionally regulate yourself. So again, it comes down to like, I need you to do X, Y, and Z because I am super stressed out, or this is really upsetting me. I need you to change the behavior. So rather than like turn inward and say, what's happening inside of me? Let me heal this. Let me figure out what the trigger is. Instead, we go outward and we're like, I need you to be different than who you are to make me feel better. That's what our natural tendency is to do. What I am saying and suggesting is that when you're actually healing, you don't need anybody to be different. You don't need to have them following your manual. Like when you take full radical responsibility, that is really when you take your power back. So I'm going to show you what this looks like if we're not practicing our healing work, okay? If we're not really looking inward. In relationships, whether it's significant other, sisters, brothers, parents, coworkers, whoever it is, you may find that you're arguing a lot, having a lot of disagreements, that you have a lot of poor communication, that you blame said person on who they're being or who they're not being for you. Okay, you might walk away and avoid at all costs because you're like, this is just too much for me to deal with. I can't. Be dismissive of the other person or dismissive of the relationship in general, like whatever, I give up. I just don't know what else to do. You can find yourself maybe exploding a lot where you hold a lot in and because you're bothered by it and you don't know what to do with it. And so then you just explode. It can also look like, so this is more of the kind of avoidant behavior, but this is more of what happens like with codependency, right? Like, no, don't leave, don't leave, don't leave. I'm sorry. I'll pull myself together. I'll do whatever you need me to do. I'll be whoever you need me to be. It's very much a people pleasing kind of response where, if the other person is like, this is too much for me, or, we're in a toxic cycle, we might feel the need to be something that we're not and fear that we're going to really experience negative emotion. It may also look like manipulating. Okay, a very sneaky way of manipulating is maybe trying to get people to be something that they're not and disguising it in this icky kind of way that they don't realize. So I see this most with like narcissistic behavior. If you've ever been in a narcissistic relationship or you had narcissistic parents, what it will look like is maybe they're explosive, right? Or they ignore you and they kind of get you right where they want you in the sense that, it's like you're begging for them to come back. And then they use that, they know that they have you, right? Because it's kind of like going back to that visual with the holes, right? Whatever you don't have. If you meet a narcissist when you have not healed, that is like a recipe for disaster because they're like, oh, they don't have it. I'm going to heal. I'm going to plug every hole that they have. And then I'm going to manipulate. I'm going to maybe leave or do weird things that makes them intuitively know that that it's not right and that they should leave. But then just as I'm about to leave and they beg, then I'm going to come swoop back in. I'm going to love bomb them, right? I'm going to make sure that I really like love on them to make them feel perfect again. And then I'm going to start my manipulative cycle again. Okay. So that's how people get stuck in like even toxic relationships. They have unhealed stuff they're walking around with, and people who have a narcissistic personality are going to sense that. And you're going to be in a situation that you really don't want to be in. And that's why healing is so important, so that is not even like the potential for a match. And if it does match, you know it immediately and you can get out of there. And it can also look like just disconnecting. Okay. Disconnecting from everything, disconnecting from everyone, feeling like this is just too much. So what this actually creates is this almost like tug of war in our relationships. Because what will happen is you'll give all of your power away to avoid your negative emotions. And when I say like give your power away, I mean you will oftentimes blame the other person for, how you're feeling or what you're thinking or the experiences that you're having. So it shows up as blaming. And anytime you want to blame someone for how you're feeling, that is a sign that you have something to heal. Okay, so whether it's your husband makes you mad from something super minor to your husband makes you mad for something super big, when you go to blame, rather than turn inward first of why it triggered you in the first place, or what you're tolerating or what you're accepting. When you do the blame game first and the self-reflection later, that's just a sign like there's some things that you can heal to where your reaction is not going to be as impulsive. You'll want others to fix and heal themselves, because being with your triggers feels hard. So the way that this shows up a lot for my clients, and it showed up for me whenever I first started coaching, is I would be infuriated that I was investing time and money into becoming the highest version of myself, becoming this great version of myself. And yet the person that I'm interacting with, or the person that actually, like, here's the deal. A lot of family trauma later, I'm going to coaching and therapy to heal the family trauma. Meanwhile, the people who caused the trauma are not doing anything, right? And so what I would want to do is, really place blame on them in the sense of like, they need to fix their stuff. They need to heal themselves, because nothing in them is changing. It's not fair that I'm doing all of the work. It's not fair that I'm investing all of the money when they're the ones who caused all of the things I'm getting coached on, right? And so it very much felt like a point, the finger, I put here, turn and critique everything they are or are not doing. When you're doing that, you're dismissing your own healing work again. You want to feel better. And the only way your brain thinks that it can feel better is if they change. Okay, so if your brain is doing that, whether you're currently a coaching client and you're thinking, my so-and-so needs to get a coach because I'm doing all this work and they're not doing any of it, or you're just in a situation where you're like, my mom needs to go to therapy because she's the reason that I am the way that I am, right? When you turn and look at someone else for what they are or are not doing, you're really, you're pushing your own work aside, okay? So it's the brain's sneaky way of being like, I don't want to deal with this myself. Let's go turn on what other people should be doing, because I feel like I'm doing what I need to be doing. So let's focus on them and how they're not doing it. Okay. It's just a sneaky protective mechanism where your brain's like, this healing work is so hard. Can we focus on the fact that other people need to be doing it so that I can take a break? That's kind of what happens there. So you may feel like you want to throw in the towel, and that doesn't mean like necessarily end a relationship, but what the brain does very sneakily it'll be like, it's never going to change. I don't even know why I'm trying, or this is way too hard. I don't even know why I would want to work on this, or, our relationship is probably done for, or, and whoever it is, with siblings, with parents, with someone we really love as a spouse. You may notice that your brain disguises it as a boundary, but you won't feel good about it. So what that means is like when you become almost fatigued and wanting to throw in the towel because the work is challenging to really heal yourself, it's very easy to disguise the actions you're taking. Like, let's say you cut off a sibling because you're like, this sibling is just not changing. They're not doing the work. They're always triggering me. They're not nice to me. They're mean to me. I'm just going to cut them off and never talk to them again. And that's my boundary. Your brain will want to disguise it as a boundary, as if it's a healthy thing to do. But what you might be missing in that moment is the work you could do to heal, so that when you're around that sibling or whoever it is, you're not even triggered to begin with. Does that make sense? It's very sneaky. Our brain is so sneaky. All right. So here's what you need to do. All right. Get comfortable feeling emotion. I know that's not what you probably want to hear, but that is what has to happen. You have to get comfortable with feeling your emotion. Here's the real raw truth, and I hope that it makes you feel better, that feelings are just vibrations at different intensities. So whether you feel sad, irate, furious, mad, upset, or you feel happy, joyful, grateful, whatever those are, it doesn't matter. There are no good or bad emotions. There's just pleasant and unpleasant. Okay. They're at different intensities. Okay. And so the bad emotion, or not the bad emotions, because there are no bad emotions, the unpleasant emotions are going to have the stronger intensities. Okay. And we really have a hard time sitting with those because nobody really taught us how. Again, it goes back to the emotional regulation. Did your parents know how to teach you emotional regulation, or did they freak out every time that they were upset about something? I can go back and tell you a million stories of moments where screaming was the case, storming out was the case, yelling was the case, police being involved was the case. I have so many examples of lack of adult emotional regulation, and that is who I learned from. So as I grew up, I either people pleased to regulate myself, or whenever I became upset, it was this big to do because I would hold it all in, hold it all in, and hold it all in, and to the point where I exploded and could not regulate myself. I couldn't regulate the little emotions, the little intensities. I couldn't regulate the big intensities. And so what I did was kind of numb myself out, buffer, so I felt better, and ignore all of my problems and then blame other people. Okay, but that is the most powerless place you can be, because whatever you're delegating responsibility to, or whoever you're delegating responsibility to, you take away your power to be able to change and to fix it. Okay, so circumstantial challenges or trauma-related emotions will have a higher intensity, making it harder to sit with because your brain and body will use fight or flight to keep you safe. So basically, all of that mouthful is just to say, when you have a very intense negative emotion, your brain will go into fight or flight, say, this is a problem, it's not safe, right? We need to drink alcohol. We need to go shopping. We need to go to the gym and spend a few hours there, right? Where it's past the point of healthy. It's like a buffering technique. We need to watch Netflix. We need to eat snacks. Even though we're not hungry at all, we need to go eat some Ben and Jerry's because that's going to make us feel better. So when we don't have this self-awareness, knowing that emotions are just different intensities and different vibrations in our body, we really have a hard time sitting with it, and we will use a buffer to try to lessen the intensity. Okay. But when we use something else to try and lessen the intensity, then we end up missing the work we could do to heal it, so that whenever that situation arises, that there's really not an intensity at all. Or if there is, we notice it and we just know how to move through it. Okay. And that's really what coaching will help people do, is be like, okay, I recognize what I'm feeling. I didn't respond in a way that made me feel like shit, right? And I think those are big wins I celebrate with my clients, is like when they know before coaching, they would have done a completely different thing. And they're starting to learn their body. They're starting to learn their mind. And they're like, oh my God, I have way more control than I thought. I'm responding so much differently. I'm getting different results. That's a huge win. And it's a huge sign of healing. So how do you know if you've truly healed from something? Okay, and this is a good example of like even what those different levels of intensity can look like, right? When it's like happy or joyful, or elated, it can be really up here. And sometimes it's hard to even feel overjoyed. Have you ever felt so happy you start crying, like maybe the birth of your child, or just like an award that you get or an honor that you get, and it's just like the emotion, even though it's amazing, it feels like too much, and your body kind of freaks out, and then it just like sobs uncontrollably, or it doesn't even know what to do with it. So it's like, it's okay, it's just intense, right? Same thing when we're really upset, or we're feeling really sad, or a perfect example is grief. When you lose someone that you love, the intensity of that emotion can sometimes feel like it's just too much, but it's not a problem. It's just saying like, hey, this is a big intensity emotion going through our body. What our brain tries to do is buffer through it or distract us. And so instead, can you learn to sit with that? So really, how to know if you've healed from something. Let's just say that you're trying to get over someone who's hurt you, or you're trying to heal family relationships. Notice the triggers that you have felt previously with that person or in that environment, and then start noticing like the level of intensity that it has. As you're actually healing, if you're really truly doing the work, that level of intensity is going to be less and less and less. It's going to be, less severe. You're going to have less urges to do something. You're going to be less impulsive. You're going to have less fight or flight, because if you get really comfortable sitting with your emotions and actually healing and understanding yourself, the intensity is not going to be bothersome. And you're going to know that you're doing the work to actually heal yourself. So this has been huge in my journey. the last 6 years of coaching has been working on how do I heal from such traumatic things from people who maybe are, not going to change and haven't changed. And the amazing thing is that a lot of the people that I had problems with that I went to coaching for, they haven't changed at all, but I've changed so much and I've healed so much that we have an amazing relationship, not because they're different at all, just because I know how to navigate my own triggers and my own emotions. And therefore we get a completely different experience and have different experiences together. It's a very powerful thing. And it is possible for anyone. I promise you. Okay, so here is how to respond to your triggers in a healthy way. It's as crazy as it sounds, pause. If you listen to my podcast, I always say when emotions are high, intelligence is low. Okay, meaning that your emotional intelligence goes every time your body has an emotion. Okay, it's not thinking as clearly. A lot of times we feel much more impulsive whenever we're having that intensity, because again, that intensity, if we don't know how to be with it, we're like, and then we just react. Okay. And that might be like screaming, yelling, name calling, doing things we're not proud of, storming out. Like we just don't have as much control. So when you are triggered by whatever it is, whether it's something super micro level, minor, right? Like somebody spills something on the floor, doesn't clean it up right away, to, somebody in your family saying something to you that you think is very offensive, pause. I want you to pause and I want you to just observe what is happening in your body. What is the vibration? What's the level of intensity? What's happening inside of yourself? If you can even just take that moment to do that, your impulse control is going to develop so much more. And that is a skill. You're not always going to be, the person that was born with amazing impulse control. That is a skill that we have to develop. When we're emotionally triggered, that skill is, one that kind of tends to go out the window. And so actively practicing, wanting to respond in a more healthy way is pausing and observing what is happening in yourself. Okay, what thoughts am I having? What emotion am I feeling? What am I thinking about what this person has said or what this person has done or what they haven't done? What's the level of intensity in my body? And as you're doing that, you're taking responsibility for how you feel first and observing what's happening in you first, so that you don't just react and start blaming, right? Put responsibility on someone else, that you're very clean and clear first. And then to take it a step further, you can even look at why it bothered you in the first place, right? What are those holes? Like, was it, I feel disrespected? I feel less than, I feel unloved, I feel whatever it is, because when you can recognize the patterns that are showing up, like what we talked about in the very beginning, and you're very clear on like, that's probably why I had the vibration in my body. Do I want to respond to this right now? Like, this is mine. So I have a podcast called That Is Theirs and This Is Mine. And a lot of times the people, the way that they're interacting with us, the things that they're doing mean a lot less than what it activates in us. So I always tell my clients, like, when you're triggered by someone or something, a lot of times what needs to happen is you really want to know why you're even triggered to begin with. And that's your work. That's not for them to fix. It's not for them to figure out. It's really about what's happening inside of you and why. Okay, so something just so important to think about. So I think that completes our Heal masterclass. And if any of you guys are interested in doing this work, you can reach out, you can schedule a consult. We can talk about one-on-one. I have 3 spots left for 2022. And then the way that things will look kind of moving forward in 2023, I'll keep you posted on, because there's going to be some shifts and changes. But if this is something that you want to dive into, you are more than welcome to sign up for a consult. Otherwise, what I would love is to answer any of your questions. So if you go down to the Q&A box, you can submit anything you have questions on, and I will answer them. I'm going to look. Okay, some questions about, will there be a replay? I will keep you posted. If there is a replay, you will be emailed the link and it will expire. It won't be something that's up forever. So sorry if you couldn't hear me because I was just scratching near my mic. But if I do a replay, it will be emailed out to you guys, but it will not be up forever. So it will be something that you'll want to kind of watch in a timely manner. So that way, if you have any questions or just don't want to miss the content, you'll have it that way. What questions do you have? Okay, I see some coming through. Keep asking your questions. And also, if you have to go, I know it's a work night for some people, so thank you for being on. If you are not interested in hearing people's questions or learning the answers to their questions, you can go. And I just thank you for even being here and attending with me on a holiday week. I really do appreciate it. Okay, so I'm getting all kinds of questions. I love it, you guys. Okay, when does cutting off a family member become a true boundary? For instance, a mother who constantly just tries to take advantage of and disrespect. Okay, so when does cutting off a family member become a true boundary? It becomes a boundary, like a true boundary, whenever you have really worked on your own triggers. You observe your triggers, you know why, like for instance, them taking advantage of you or someone else that you know, right? You feeling disrespected, those are coming from your own perceived experiences. So there's something that maybe the mother is doing that feels disrespectful. Okay, feeling disrespected is an emotion. So it's a vibration in your body. And our emotions come from the thoughts that we're thinking. So whatever this mother says or does, your brain has a thought, and that thought might be like, that is not okay, or I don't agree with that, or that is so rude, or that is disrespectful. And then based on that thought, you have an emotion. I feel disrespected. Okay. When there is unhealed stuff there and you don't truly understand why you feel disrespected, or you are allowing this person to take advantage of, really, because right, people will take advantage of us as long as we allow. Okay, and so that is a good sign, like maybe a boundary is needed. But when it's coming from a place of like, I haven't cleaned up my thoughts, I don't even know why I'm allowing it, I don't really know why I feel disrespected, or if I have done the work to heal, then a lot of times the boundary comes from a place of maybe like anger, or I need you to follow the rules, or you're not going to be in my life. It's very much reactionary. Whereas when you've healed, you can say, what is best for me? What's best for my family? And why do I love my reasons for why I would set this boundary? So maybe the boundary is, if this is going to continue, I'm not going to come over anymore. And it's said from a full place of self-love from yourself. Like, I have worked through this, and a boundary, here's another thing. And whether, because I don't know if you listen to the podcast or not, but with a boundary, people don't have to follow our boundaries. Okay. When you set a boundary, the boundary is for you. So for instance, I will tell you a boundary I have. I have a boundary around people yelling or screaming at me, because I grew up in a lot of verbal and emotional abuse. Okay. And so as a kid, I would go into fight or flight anytime someone even raised their voice. Teachers, anybody, when anybody would raise their voice, I would totally have a freak out. I do not like it. And to this day, I will not tolerate it. But I didn't used to say that, right? Like, people would start yelling or screaming and I would go into fight or flight, and I'd start crying, or I would get really angry and I would avoid them. Or, if they asked what's wrong, I would not tell them because I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want them yelling again, right? And so I had to do a lot of healing of like, where's this coming from? Is it that I felt unsafe? Is it that I felt disrespected? Is it like, what's that coming from? And once I got really cleaned up on, where it was coming from for me, I had to ask myself, okay, am I okay if people scream and yell, towards me, even if they're not yelling at me, even if I'm not the one that has upset them? Am I okay with someone having a raised, elevated voice in my direction? And 99% of the time, no, because for me, it's like, that person is not emotionally regulated. If they're yelling or screaming, they're not regulating their own emotions. Okay, so I'm not going to sit there and, like there's things that we can hold space for and choose to hold space for, and there's things that maybe we don't want to hold space for. I'm really good at holding space for people in whatever moods that they're in, but where I draw a boundary is like screaming and yelling is a no-go for me. It's just a no. It's not going to happen. So with a boundary, you have to be super clear about communicating that boundary with the other person. And when you communicate your boundary, it usually has a consequence. So for instance, let's say I'm on the phone with a loved one. They start raising their voice. They start getting emotionally unregulated. They're not managing their mind. They don't work with a coach. They've never had therapy. They start screaming and they think that that's okay. Okay, if I don't think that's okay, I'm going to say to them, hey, listen, and kind of let them, if they're going to stop, okay, or slow their roll. Listen, I know that you're upset right now. I hear you. I can totally see why you're upset, right? Practicing empathy. However, if you continue to yell on the phone like this towards me, right, or at me, or even if you're not yelling at me, if you continue to talk in this raised yelling voice, I'm just going to hang up the phone until we can have a more calm conversation about it. I know you're upset, but I'm going to hang up the phone if you can't stop yelling. Okay. They need to hear you say that and they need to acknowledge it. So, okay, I hear you. Sorry, right? Or whatever. Now, what is most important after they've acknowledged your boundary is that if they start yelling or screaming or doing whatever it is, that you follow through with what you say. So again, if I was on the phone with them, they start yelling, they start screaming. I don't start screaming at them, you're not respecting my boundary, right? They don't have to. They don't have to respect your boundary. Everybody has free will. You don't have to respect other people's boundaries, although it would be nice, right? They don't have to respect your boundaries, although it would be nice. Okay, the boundary is for you. So if I'm on the phone with them, yet again, they start screaming, I'm going to say, hey, listen, last time we talked, I let you know that if you started screaming or yelling, that I was going to hang up the phone. So I'm going to hang up. When you've calmed down or when we can have a conversation that's going to go a little differently where you're not yelling, we can talk. But for now, I'm going to hang up. And even if they are so pissed, right? Even if they decide in their lack of emotional regulation to disown me or whatever, how you know it's a very healthy, true boundary is when I can be okay no matter how they respond. I am following what I need so deeply. I feel it so from such a healed place that it's like, it's okay that they respond however they respond. They might be really mad. They might disown me. They might stop talking to me. I'm going to be okay because I've healed in this department. I know what I will and will not tolerate. And they have to learn emotional regulation, but they're not going to do it with me, right? Like they're just not. I'm not going to be that person that holds space for that specific thing. So you get to decide what that is. So I would say if it's coming from a place of like, you need to do this, or, you're like ruining my life. You're not making me feel good, whatever it is, just be really clear of that. If it doesn't feel clean or it feels spiteful, or you feel a lot of negative emotion around it, if you don't even feel like you can communicate it with that person, then it's probably not a true boundary in a place where you're really ready. It probably means that there's some work to be done. Does that help answer your question? All right, next question. When you're in that pause moment, how do you calm yourself down to make a good decision? Yes, so this is the biggest thing. And the reason that pause is so important, because a lot of times what we do is we don't pause. That's why we're not in a state of calm. When things happen, we have the knee-jerk reaction. It's such a human thing. We have a lot of times lack of impulse control that varies for different people. So all of my clients, whether they join my group program or one-on-one, get to take an emotional intelligence assessment. And one of the categories on there is their impulse control. Some people already come in with a good amount of it. Some people do not. And sometimes the reason people come in with a good amount of impulse control is because they're people pleasers. And so they don't respond with that knee-jerk reaction because they want to please people in general. But other times, it's because they were never taught to regulate their emotions. Again, we learn that a lot of times based on how our caregivers responded to things or the people that we were brought up around. And so when you're in that pause moment, what you're doing is really self-analyzing. So when I am triggered by something, no matter what it is, let's just say it's like a chore around the house that I want done a certain way, or I feel like it should be done at the time that I want it done, right? If I'm like, hey, can you help me vacuum? Usually for a woman, we mean like, get with it right now, right? And maybe for our husband, that might mean in an hour after I shower and lay around or whatever. If I notice that vibration, right, it's going to feel like, ooh, and it's going to be intense. That pause moment is so important, because what I might do without it is be like, I needed you to do it now. There was a reason I asked you. You never helped me with anything, right? Whatever. There's that version, or there's the version of like, okay, why am I upset? What am I feeling? What's that emotion? Can I sit with this for a minute before responding? Okay. So you are doing the work to calm yourself. Okay. So it's like, how do you calm yourself? That pause moment is the way that you calm yourself. Like you are breathing through your own vibration, because the opposite is you just react in the vibration. And then you end up in an argument with your significant other, or, your sister or your brother or your mother, or whatever. And it's because you didn't take the time for you to be like, let me get grounded, analyze what I'm feeling first, figure out why it's a problem. Why is my brain making it a big deal? What am I making it mean? Right? Like there's a reason there's even a vibration in you, and figuring that out first before responding can save you so much in your relationship. Okay. Let's see. Next question. I seem to place really high expectations on people and get angry when they don't meet them, but I am totally aware I shouldn't be shitting on people. That's what I call it, shitting on people. How do I calm down or stop expecting actions from other people? So here's what's interesting. You have expectations because of what you're wanting to feel, right? Like the high expectations is I expect someone to perform or do this certain thing so that I feel better. So what do you anticipate feeling based on those expectations? Like, let's say you have a list of expectations and you were to write them all out. If you were my client, this is what I would have you do in a session. Okay. After like, if we were talking this out, I would be like, okay, what are your expectations? So that would be the first thing. What are your expectations? Who are those expectations for? Maybe it's a partner, maybe it's a coworker, maybe, it's sister or brother, whatever. Okay, now that we have a list of all of your expectations, what will you feel if they meet them? So what emotions will you feel? Maybe it's happy, trusting, fulfilled, right? What will happen? The next question would be, what will happen if you don't, or if they don't meet those expectations? Frustrated, annoyed, let down. Here's what's interesting. The emotions you'll feel if they don't meet them are the ones you're trying to avoid. So that is your work, right? Like being okay, sitting with the vibrations of the emotions for the expectations that go unmet. Okay. For the expectations that do get met and the emotions you anticipate feeling, those are the ones that you think you won't be able to fill for yourself if they don't do it. Okay, so that's kind of like where holes might be, okay, in a different kind of sense. It's like, I want them to meet my manual so that I get to feel these feel-good emotions. If they don't meet my manual, these are the emotions I'm at risk of feeling, and I don't want to feel them. And that is why I'm having a hard time, right? So that's what's actually happening in your system. So it's not that you necessarily stop expecting certain things for someone, but your work, like the healing work here, is like, why do you expect it in the first place? Because what your brain is trying to do is it's trying to avoid negative emotion. And you get to avoid it when they meet your expectations. And it wants you to feel good, which you get to feel when they do meet your expectations, because then you don't have to do the work to feel it yourself without them. Does that make sense? Let me know. All right. What are some examples to fill your own empty holes? Okay. Let me actually go back to what this looks like. Okay. So this one, or let's just say it's validation, right? You want to feel validated, but you don't feel validated without someone giving you that validation. Really, the healing work here is, what do you need to feel validated of? What are you wanting to believe? When people tell me, I want to feel like I need someone to validate me, like to let me know I'm doing a good job, my question for my clients is always, why? Why? Why don't you believe you're doing a good job? Okay. When I ask those questions, their brain's going to flood them with a lot of thoughts. Like, I'm not doing a good job because I was not patient with my kids this week. I am not doing a good job because my boss didn't give me feedback. Like, what it starts to show me is all of the places that their brain is looking for validation, right? To be able to feel certain in something. So that's just one example. And so the work there is like, how can you feel certain about yourself? Like, give me all of the reasons you believe you're doing an amazing job at being a mom. Give me all of the reasons why you feel you're doing amazing at your job. Now give me all the reasons you feel like you're not. Okay. And then we look at all of the reasons maybe they feel that they're not doing a good job as a mom, not doing a good job at their job, or whatever it is, not being a good enough, partner or whatever. And we really start picking that apart, because here's the funny thing about our brain is it's full of stories. It's full of a million stories. And we have to be willing to pick those stories apart. This is why I've heard from like 4 different clients this week. The work in the podcast is so different, right? Because you hear things and you can logically be like, I get this. But like, until your brain offers your own specific scenario, it's very hard to dissect it. So, it would be for you recognizing, what are my empty holes? What do I want from someone else? What do I see within myself that I feel like I'm missing, and this other person swoops in and they give me what I'm wanting, right? Because whenever that person, like the things you're longing for or the things you're wanting in someone else, those are the indicators of what you haven't learned how to give to yourself, whether that's self-love, whether it's feeling happy without external things. So like, for instance, when people are like, I'm not happy, and you might say, well, what do you feel like you need to be happy? They might say, I need more money. I need more time, right? So what they're doing is they're delegating happiness to the external things. So what they're saying is, I'm never going to be happy without a lot of money, without a lot of time. Okay. What if those things were to never come? Does that mean you walk around your entire life feeling unhappy and depressed and low and bleh, right? And people get stuck in these cycles. I was in it for a long time. I always, for the longest time, thought more money is going to make me happy, more time is going to make me happy. And for like, there's a certain extent where, yeah, that could be true, but there's also false hope in that, right? Because it's very temporary. Because again, when it's external, you think like when you go to reach for that thing and you get it, you feel that happy emotion. But if it's, again, borrowed, so it's kind of like, happiness is not just about money or time, right? It's about like what you're feeling inside and being really good at feeling that emotion. And so if this were money, right, and I put it here, or time and I put it here, it's borrowed, meaning that if money goes away, so does happiness, if that's how I associate it. If time goes away, so does happiness. So you want to look at what you're trying to borrow to feel better. Does that make sense? Let me know. I can go more in depth if you need me to. Someone said, I love this topic. You're doing a great job. Definitely needed for sure. Thank you. How do you do the holidays when everyone in the family wants it to be their day and you don't want to go to a bunch of homes in the holiday? So this is a perfect example of boundaries, right? And figuring out what you need and what's going to be best for you. Because there's going to be people that are mad, right? There's going to be the people that expect you to go to every little place. And you have to ask yourself why you would or wouldn't do that, and if you love your decisions. So what are the reasons you would do all of that and go to every little event or or agree to it being their day? Is it because you're people pleasing and you don't want them to be upset? What are the reasons behind that? And once you get clear, then you can kind of make your decision, like, what do I want? If I wasn't worried about people pleasing, if I wasn't worried about making people upset, like, what do I truly want? I just did a podcast on this, but it's something I've been talking to my clients a lot this week. It's like, how do you want to remember your life circumstances in hindsight? So it's kind of like picking the battle between, if you're going to have this whatever holiday with your siblings, with your parents, with your, partners, people, you're going to have the memory in your memory bank in hindsight forever. So you can almost do work ahead of time to say, like, how do I want to have this memory in hindsight? Do I want it to be where we did our own thing and, it was just us? Do I want it to be where we went to each little family unit and we enjoyed each other's company at all the places? Do I want it to be like we picked one place to go and spent time with them and then we came back and did our own thing? Like, you get to decide, and there is no wrong decision. Somebody is probably going to be upset because they're not emotionally regulating themselves, right? But that's not your responsibility. It's our responsibility to emotionally regulate ourselves. It's other people's responsibility as adults to emotionally regulate themselves. And you're going to encounter a lot of people who don't even know how to do it. That's what makes life so complicated, right? So when you're healing and you're doing your stuff, you get to a very clean place of like, I'm okay with my decision. I love my decision. I love my reasons. I'm going to handle it this way. And when you can do it from a very clean place where you're not worried about what other people are going to think or say, that's kind of when like you're really on path to healing. Because it's like, I get that you're upset. I know that you want I know you want to do it at your house, or I know you want us to come to a bunch of different places, but that's just not what we desire to do. And when you love your reasons and you feel good about it, it's not going to be a problem. Okay. Do you have any favorite reads on this topic of healing? I've enjoyed reading different things on this new journey of mine. I cannot think of any books off the top of my head. I'd have to kind of go through, like in this closet over here, I've got a million gazillion books, so I'll peek. And if you want to message me on Instagram, just as a reminder, I'll try and peek and see if I have any that I have loved that stand out. Okay, perfect. You're welcome. How do you deal with toxic in-laws when you're married without being rude and keeping peace in your family? It's hard to keep your kids from their grandparents, but when they are toxic, you have to protect your littles. Absolutely. And so it kind of goes back to the boundaries thing, right? Like, and keeping in mind that when we say someone is toxic, that's our perception, right? They probably don't believe that they're toxic, but something in their behavior, something in the way that they interact feels toxic to us. And so it comes down to, what are my boundaries here? If you were a client of mine, or maybe you are a client of mine because it's anonymous, right? It's like, I would really venture to ask what specifically feels toxic that is a non-negotiable. Something that I teach on the podcast and to my clients is that our soul has a soul hell yes and a soul hell no. It's kind of like when people get on the phone with me and they're thinking about coaching, something in their gut either says soul hell yes, I know I want coaching, I know she's my girl, like, let's do it. I'm scared shitless, but let's do it. Like, it's a very clear answer that's defined in our gut. Or it's like, so hell no, I'm not ready to do this work. I don't want to do it. Or she's not my person, right? And we do it with everything. It's kind of like, do you want to go on a girls trip? So hell yes, right? Or do you want to go on a family trip in a little tiny home? Hell no, right? We totally know when we really listen to our gut. And so the work here for you is like, your brain is saying they're toxic, and it's very general, maybe just in your question, right? You might have specific examples. So what I would ask you as the coach is, I want you to make a list of what you feel they do that is toxic and what is a soul hell no. Okay, meaning that if you decide to get together for the holidays, you can do it in a healed place. You can do it from a place of, I'm doing this for the kids. They're going to get to be around their grandparents. I'm doing it for my partner, right? But maybe there's a discussion ahead of time with your partner, or maybe a boundary that you set, like, if you do this with my kids, scream at them, right? spank them, whatever it is, I'm just making things up, then we're going to leave the gathering, right? And just making it super clear. And again, they don't have to follow the rules that you set. You follow the rules that you set. So whatever the consequence is, it's really important that instead of losing your shit, right, that you recognize it's up to me to follow my boundary. That's how I teach people how they're going to treat me, right? And so if I set a boundary, it's very clear they've agreed to the boundary. Even if they break the boundary, it's up to me to follow the boundary. So maybe if they do XYZ, we leave the gathering, but I told them ahead of time, it's not going to be a surprise to them. Yes, they might be pissed, they might be mad, but it was made very clear. And they chose not to follow the boundary, right? And so that's kind of how you handle that. It's really getting clear on what you believe is toxic, and of those toxic things, what are non-negotiables? You know what I mean? Is there anything where you're like, hell no, they're not going to be around them? Thank you for doing this. So helpful with learning about boundaries. You're so welcome. I've been listening for a couple weeks. Thankful for you and this way of life. I'm a work in progress to be my highest self. Oh, that's amazing. Keep doing it. Speaking of the holidays, how do you feel about drinking in moderation to kind of take the edge off when being around all the people, personalities, etc.? So just recognizing, again, this is one of those great observe moments where your brain doesn't want you to feel the negative emotions, right? Like the reason that you're even thinking, or anybody here, right? The reason that you would be thinking, should I have a drink to take the edge off? That's a key indicator of there's emotions I'm going to feel around being around so many people, around being so many personalities. I don't know how to be with those vibrations. So I'm going to delegate responsibility to an external thing to feel better. Now, I'm not judging what anybody does or doesn't do, right? Because I get it. Sometimes having a drink takes the edge off. But what I would say with my clients is I'm not shunning you or, judging whether or not you choose to do that, but I would want them to know why they're doing it. And if we're really honest about why we're doing it, it's because your brain is anticipating discomfort of some sort. And it's basically saying, I don't want to be with the discomfort. I don't want to have to do the work associated with discomfort. I'm going to let alcohol do the work for me rather than stay in my body and in that vibration that might feel very intense. Does that answer the question? So it's like, I think like I have had a lot of clients who are like, I think I have an alcohol problem. I know that I use alcohol as coping. I don't know if I'm an alcoholic per se, but I definitely use it. Whether they are or not, what I always tell them is, you want to notice when you're drinking. Are you drinking to buffer emotions away? Are you drinking from discomfort? Are you drinking because your problems feel too big? Or are you actively choosing to drink because you want that glass of wine, or you're in a social gathering where you're like, I'm going to have a drink. I don't need the drink. I could say no to the drink, but I'm going to have the drink because I want a Prosecco, right? It's just getting really clear on why you do the things that you do. That's a huge piece of awareness work. And when you don't like the reason you're doing something, that's usually why it's time to like do some work around it. It's like, you know what I mean? I don't like that I'm yelling at my kids. I don't like that I'm a loose cannon. I don't like that I'm not communicating with my husband. I don't like that we're fighting all the time. I don't like that I feel disconnected from everyone. I don't like that I have these holes that I'm running around with. And when you don't like something, that's usually when we make the choice to change it. Because your brain right now, it feels like that's the solution. Do you have any quick strategies to help with balancing your emotions when you have anxiety? I'm cray when I'm on my period. I love the honesty. So I am typically an anxious wreck. I've had anxiety my entire life. I am not medicated on anything for it. Just my personal preference. I've done a podcast on This Is Not Your Practice Life. It's called A Holistic Conversation Around Anxiety and Why. So in case anybody's curious, I won't go into it here. But let's see, balancing your emotions. So again, even with anxiety is an emotion. And anxiety, the emotion of anxiety is complicated in that it's anticipation of something. So it's like anticipation, I'm going to feel awful, right? Anticipation, I'm going to even feel anxious. Anticipation, I'm going to feel depressed. Anticipation, I'm going to feel annoyed. And so anxiety is like almost this, it's just like in the body, it's a super intensive emotion. Like on that picture where I shared what it even looks like. it would be like anxiety to me. It feels like it's all the way down here. Like the range is just so freaking big. Because like we're anticipating pain on top of whatever emotion we're actually feeling. And I think the anxiety too, that it's not going to go away. And so it perseverates. So my strategy for balancing the emotion is honestly letting myself feel it. You have to feel it to heal it. And the reason that we stay in spirals of anxiety is because a lot of times we're trying to push it away and push it down. So what we actually need to do is, instead of like running away and pushing it down and drinking alcohol and getting on Netflix and eating Ben and Jerry's and, avoiding the emotion, lean into it. What does that anxiety have you doing? You know what I mean? Like, is it going to make you cry if you keep having it? Is it going to make you, want to like lay down and just, I don't know, like spiral or rock in a corner? I always say when I feel anxious, I feel like I need to like rock in a corner. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And the normal reaction is to want to run away from it. And so now, instead of doing that, I just sit with it, with the discomfort. And here's honestly my strategy. If you were to be around me when I'm having a full-blown anxiety panic attack, what you're going to see is me putting a hand on my heart like this. I put the other hand on my stomach and I literally stop and I breathe. And sometimes tears will fall because the anxiety intensity feels so deep in my body that I'm like, I'm going to die. Like my brain is like, I'm going to die. I hate this emotion. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. And it's, wanting it to go away, but I will just stop and I will breathe very intentionally. And I always repeat to myself, in this moment, I'm okay. In this moment, nothing has gone wrong. I am safe. I am loved. And I will repeat that as many times as I need, get my breathing back down to normal, and then I will move about my day. And that way I keep anxiety from completely controlling me. Sometimes I will sage, sometimes I'll use incense, sometimes I will get in the bath. So what I'm looking for is not escaping the emotion. I'm looking for healthy ways to cope, letting myself lean through it. Think of it, if you're a mom, the contractions. Think of anxiety or any negative emotion as a contraction. You're not making it go away. You can't make the contractions go away. You can make them lessen, and you're either lessening them with medication, right? AKA the medication could be Netflix and alcohol and, shopping, or you can just let yourself experience that contraction, knowing like on the other side, everything's going to be okay. And so, what are the natural ways to get through a contraction? A lot of times it's going to be, that deep breathing. It's going to be like, if the tears need to fall, let the tears fall. So sometimes if you even think of your anxiety, it's not a problem. It's just like a very painful contraction. Breathe through it. You're going to be okay. There's going to be this amazing gift on the other side. And on the other side of moving through anxiety in a very healthy manner is a healed version of yourself with less intensity of the anxiety. Okay. Thank you so much for doing this class, Macie. All of this information is very helpful. On the matter of healing, I often easily cry when talking to strangers about past traumas or when dealing with strong, unpleasant emotions. This doesn't often happen with people who are close to me. Is this a sign of being unhealed? And is there a way to regulate this automatic response? So yeah, I would be very curious as to why the strong, unpleasant emotions come up when it's strangers, right? What's the difference in telling someone you're comfortable with versus telling someone that you're not? And that's going to be some self-reflection, maybe sitting with yourself and really asking, like, what does my brain kind of offer when it's a stranger? Like when I start talking about it, why does that emotion come up? And it could be because your system is even getting used to sharing your story, right? And being honest and moving that energy through, kind of like the anxiety of it all. With people you're comfortable with, it can probably come out in a very subconscious manner where you almost get to bypass the feelings. Whereas when you're with a stranger who you're hoping will hold space for you or will hold space for you, there's a level of vulnerability attached to the story. And because of that, the intensity of emotions are deeper. And therefore, like, you can't really bypass it because it's telling strangers, a part of your story or just talking to them and it coming up may feel a little unsafe and uncertain because it hasn't been processed. And that could be why there's more intensity with strangers than there is with people that you're very close to. What is what if someone does not agree to the boundary or acts like you're overreacting when you set it? This is a perfect example of why being healed when you set a boundary is so big. Because most people are not going to agree with your boundaries. Most people are not going to like it. And most people are going to think you're overreacting. And you just have to be okay with that, right? Because you have to understand and love your reasons for why you're setting the boundary. That's why I say, even get clear, like for the person who said, I think that these people are toxic, but what does toxic mean? And make a list of what things they specifically do that your brain registers as toxic. And then of that list, what would you say are non-negotiables that you do not want your kids to be around, or you yourself do not want to be around? So sometimes our brain does this umbrella thing where it's like, I'm going to set a boundary because I'm having trouble dealing with my emotions, right? And so that's why you want to be healed, because you want to look at truly what you're okay with and what you're not okay with. And more than likely, when you set a boundary, the other people are not going to agree with it, and they don't have to follow it. And a lot of times they're not going to, because they're going to think it's really dumb, unless they have, a good amount of respect, or they also see the problem. And you just have to be okay with the emotions you're going to feel when you honor your boundary and whenever they don't. Okay. And that's still our work to do in healing. I got to learn how to sit with my feelings when they don't honor my boundary. And I have to sit with my feelings whenever I honor my boundary and they don't like it. Okay. You're so right. That makes a lot of sense. I watch both of my alcoholic parents do all of this all the time, and I've made an effort not to drink much at all. Yeah. See, and that's you working on breaking cycles and seeing how they used to cope. Okay. And how they used to emotionally regulate. And so again, it's something that we might do because it's like, oh, it's what they did. But if we don't like the way that they handled it, or, we're just like, I don't know that that's the healthiest way for me, we can make an effort to change it. And so anytime, like even I don't drink a lot of alcohol anyways, I'm, grateful I never got that urge to use alcohol as a coping mechanism, because alcoholism runs in my family very heavily, actually. And, even when I make a decision to drink, like the other night I had a glass of wine with my husband, we went out to dinner. It's very much a place of like, I know that I don't need it. I just desire it in this moment. And am I okay with it? It's not like I'm feeling sad, I need a drink, or I'm feeling negative emotion, I need a drink. It's kind of like, I just make it from a very clean place in whatever I'm doing. Thank you. I felt this, and thank you for sharing. I'm going to try this. Okay, awesome. It looks like I answered everybody's questions. Thank you for all of those. That's perfect, because we're wrapping up right around the 90-minute mark. So again, you guys, thank you so much for being here. If there's anything that I can help you with, let me know. If I send out a replay, you will get it via email. And then you should be getting an email coming to you soon with the link to schedule a consult if you want to discuss moving forward. Again, I have 3 one-on-one spots for the rest of this year. If you have any questions, just let me know. But otherwise, I will see you guys around, and happy Thanksgiving.